Good morning, Attorney General Bondi, right here. We are joined in this room by some of the thousands of survivors from Jeffrey Epstein's horrific sex trafficking ring. They have shown such incredible courage in speaking out, in demanding accountability to bring the predators and pedophiles to justice. The Epstein Files Transparency Act required your Department of Justice to disclose the perpetrators connected with Epstein's criminal activities and to redact the information of survivors to protect their identities. Let me show you what actually happened. First, in violation of the law, your department has shown a pattern of redacting the names of powerful predators. Here behind me is one example of an email from Epstein to a man whose name was redacted. The email reads, quote, "Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video." Only after members of Congress demanded that we see the unredacted files did the world learn the name of this individual, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, the chairman and CEO of a company that had financial ties to President Trump's business and personal ties to Trump's advisor, Steve Bannon. Second, the survivors were not similarly protected, also in violation of the law. Here is another email titled Epstein Victim List. We have blurred the names of the survivors for their protection, but your Department of Justice initially released this list of 32 survivors' names with only one name redacted, along with numerous files that disclose not only the names, the emails, and the addresses of survivors, but also nude photographs and even the identities of Jane Does who had been protected for decades until your department released their names. Survivors are now telling us that their families are finding out for the first time that they were trafficked by Epstein. In their words, quote, "This release does not provide closure. It feels like a deliberate attempt to intimidate survivors, punish those who came forward, and reinforce the same culture of secrecy that allowed Epstein's crimes to continue for decades."
She didn't ask Bondi about policy. She didn't ask about timelines or memos or legal standards. She didn't ask about grand juries or redactions or the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. She asked Bondi to turn around. That was the ask. Physical, simple, human. Turn around and face the people your department harmed. Turn around and look at the survivors who are standing directly behind you in this room right now. Turn around and say the words you said in your opening statement, the apology you offered for what Epstein did to them. But say it now for what your own department did to them when it released their names, their emails, their addresses, their nude photographs, and the identities of Jane Does who had been legally protected for decades. Just turn around. Pam Bondi did not turn around. What she did instead broke the room open. And what was happening behind her, the survivors standing, hands raised, every single one of them signaling they had still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice, was already the most powerful image produced in that entire hearing. And Bondi had her back to all of it.
To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice. Please know for the record that every single survivor has raised their hand. Attorney General Bondi, you apologized to the survivors in your opening statement for what they went through at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. Will you turn to them now and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through with the absolutely unacceptable release of the Epstein files and their information?
Congresswoman, you sat before, Merrick Garland sat in this chair twice
Attorney General
Guys,
Bondi.
no, can I
I'm gonna
finish my answer?
No, I'm going to reclaim my time because I asked you a specific question
Attorney General
that
can
I would
respond to your
like you
question.
to answer, which is, will you turn to the survivors? This is not about anybody that came before you. It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize for what your Department of Justice has done.
Members get to ask the questions, the witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer. The Attorney General can
That's
respond.
not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Because she
It
doesn't
is
like the
my
answer.
time.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
why
I have asked
didn't
a
she ask
question.
Merrick Garland this?
I am
twice
reclaiming
when he
my
sat in my
time, and
chair?
when I
will
reclaim my
continue to
time,
answer.
it is
Mr. Chairman, the
my
gentlelady's
I'm
reclaimed
I'm
her
not going
time.
to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
The time belongs to the time belongs to the gentlelady. The gentlelady has 17 seconds.
Thank you. You're not going to answer this question, so let me just
Chairman,
say this.
I'll direct it to
What a
you.
massive
No, I'm
cover-up.
answering a question.
Chairman, will you restore her time? The witness
I'm
is
not going to get
interrupting.
in the gutter with this woman.
Stop the
She's
time
doing
and
theatrics.
let me have my time.
The gentlelady from Washington controls the time. The gentlelady has 17 seconds. You can proceed with your final
Thank you.
17 seconds.
What a massive cover-up this has been and continues to be.
She began with the statute, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the law Congress passed requiring the Department of Justice to do two very specific things when releasing the Epstein files. First, disclose the perpetrators, the individuals tied to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal network. Name them, identify them, put them on the public record. Second, protect the survivors. Redact the identities of those who were trafficked, abused, or exploited. Keep their names private. Shield them from further harm. That was the law. Clear language, written text, passed by Congress, signed and enforceable. Then Pramila Jayapal showed the room what the Department of Justice actually did. She placed an email on the screen behind her, an email from Jeffrey Epstein to another individual. The name of the recipient had been redacted by the DOJ, hidden, protected, removed from public view. According to Jayapal, that decision directly contradicted a statute requiring perpetrators and associates to be named rather than concealed. Then she read the message aloud. "Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video." Those were the words she placed into the record, and the identity of the person receiving that message remained hidden until members of Congress demanded access to the unredacted files. Then the name emerged: Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, chairman and CEO of a company with financial ties to Trump's business interests. A man Jayapal said also had personal ties to Steve Bannon. That, she argued, was the man the Department of Justice chose to shield. Not a victim, not a trafficked child, not a witness needing protection. A powerful businessman who received an email from Epstein referencing a torture video. His identity was hidden. Jayapal let that point settle. Then she moved to the opposite side of the equation, the survivors. She displayed a second document. Its subject line, according to her, read, Epstein Victim List. Jayapal explained that her own office had blurred the names visible on the screen to protect those listed. Then she told the committee what the DOJ had done with the same document. The Department of Justice released it with 32 survivor names visible. Only one name had been redacted. 32 people trafficked by Epstein had their names exposed publicly by the very department legally required to protect them. And according to Jayapal, it did not stop at names. It included email addresses, physical home addresses, nude photographs, the identities of Jane Does, individuals who had spent years, sometimes decades, fighting in court to keep their names sealed. People who had obtained anonymity orders from judges because of the nature of the abuse they endured. People who had rebuilt their lives on the understanding that their connection to Epstein would remain legally protected. Some had spouses who never knew the details. Some had children who were too young to understand. Some had changed cities, careers, entire identities to create distance from what happened to them. Now, Jayapal said, their names were public. Because of this release. From this Department of Justice. Then she read from a statement provided by survivors themselves. This release does not provide closure. It feels like a deliberate attempt to intimidate survivors, punish those who came forward, and reinforce the same culture of secrecy that allowed Epstein's crimes to continue for decades. That statement was devastating for a reason. The survivors were not saying the government merely made an error. They were saying the government repeated the same pattern that protected Epstein for years. Protect the powerful, expose the vulnerable, silence the harmed. Warn future victims what happens when they speak. Then Jayapal did something no procedural interruption could erase. She asked the survivors in the room, if willing, to stand. They stood. Then she asked them, if willing, to raise their hands if they had still not been able to secure a meeting with the Department of Justice. Every hand went up. Every survivor. Standing. Hands raised. Behind the Attorney General of the United States, who did not turn around. Jayapal stated it clearly for the record. Every single survivor has raised their hand. Then she asked Pam Bondi to turn and apologize. Not for what Epstein did. Bondi had already apologized for Epstein's crimes in her opening remarks. Jayapal asked her to apologize for what the DOJ itself had done. For the release. For the names. For the addresses. For the nude photographs. For the Jane Does whose anonymity was shattered. For the 32 people on a list that never should have been made public. For families learning from news coverage that a daughter, sister, wife, or mother had been trafficked by Epstein. For survivors being forced to relive trauma because bureaucrats ignored the plain language of the law. That was the apology Jayapal requested. Bondi responded by invoking Merrick Garland. She began saying Garland had sat in that chair twice, that he had faced these issues before. Jayapal immediately cut her off and reclaimed her time. She said this was not about predecessors, not about Garland, not about previous administrations. This was about Bondi taking responsibility for her own Department of Justice and the harm done to the survivors standing directly behind her, waiting for acknowledgement. Bondi still did not turn. Jim Jordan then interjected. He said the witness gets to answer however she chooses. Jayapal pushed back. She said that was not accurate. The room grew louder. Multiple voices overlapped. Jordan called it theatrics. Jayapal demanded her time back. The chairman informed her she had 17 seconds remaining. 17 seconds. Jayapal used every one. She said this was a massive cover-up. Then she traced the sequence. Trump made release of the Epstein files a centerpiece of his political messaging because he believed it would help him. Then the administration took office. Bondi claimed to have a client list. Later, a memo said there was no list. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche met privately with Ghislaine Maxwell. Then Maxwell was transferred to a minimum security prison without public explanation. And through all of it, the survivors standing behind her still had not received a single meeting with the Department of Justice. Time expired. Bondi never turned around. That moment mattered because it stripped away every abstraction. Until then, the hearing had revolved around documents, memos, redactions, statutory language, release procedures, names in files, indictment counts. All important, all real, but still institutional. Jayapal reduced the entire issue to its most human form. There are people in this room. They were harmed by a trafficking network your department was obligated to pursue. Then they were harmed again when your department exposed their names, addresses, and identities in violation of the law designed to protect them. They are standing behind you. Their hands are raised. They have not been granted a meeting. They have not been given an apology. They have not been offered repair. They have been offered exposure. Some of them had to watch their trauma become national headlines. Some had to answer calls from relatives. Some had to explain things they never chose to reveal. Some were re-traumatized by the simple act of seeing their own names online again. And now they are asking to be seen. Turn around. That was the request. Not sign an executive order, not cite a statute, not explain a legal doctrine, not announce a task force, not promise future reforms. Simply turn around. A physical movement, a human acknowledgement, a chair rotating toward people waiting to be recognized. Bondi talked about Garland. Jordan called it theatrics. The chairman pivoted to border security and moved to the next member. The survivors remained standing. Their hands remained raised. The law required their identities be protected. Their names were public. The law required perpetrators be named. A powerful man connected to the president had his name hidden. Families were learning through media coverage what had happened to loved ones. Survivors were telling Congress the release felt like deliberate intimidation. And the Attorney General, when asked to turn around, answered by saying Merrick Garland had once sat in that chair. That contrast is why the moment lasted, because it was no longer about politics, it was about visibility. Who gets shielded? Who gets exposed? Who gets named? Who gets ignored? Who receives process? Who receives silence? Who gets dignity? Who gets paperwork? The survivors were still waiting for a meeting. Every hand was up. Every person was visible to the room. Except to the one person asked to look. Bondi never turned around.